All right, boys, listen up. We have to stop calling our fragrances colognes. And in this video, I'm going to explain to you the differences between the different concentrations of your fragrances. Men's fragrances are marketed as colognes, whereas women's fragrances are marketed as perfumes. But in an industry where we're getting more and more unisex fragrances, the lines are getting blurred more than ever. So it probably makes sense to try and understand where the term cologne came from in the first place. Now, a cologne refers to an eau de cologne, which is a type of concentration of a fragrance. But why are men's fragrances called colognes? Well, the first fragrance targeted to men was released and marketed around the 1930s. Before then, fragrances and perfumes were really a women's thing. But the fragrances that were being released for men were typically lighter, fresher, like out of the shower kind of scents, and they weren't as concentrated. They were typically eau de colognes, whereas a women's fragrance was an eau de parfum or a parfum. So at the time, men's fragrances were colognes, eau de cologne, and a women's fragrance was a perfume or an eau de parfum or a parfum. And that has stuck. The term cologne has been used as a way to make men not feel feminine for buying fragrances. But nowadays, that term is completely obsolete. Nowadays, men are much more engaged in beauty and wellness industries than they were back in, the mid 1900s when these fragrances were first being introduced. Men are engaging in skincare routines. There are brands that exist purely to tailor skincare to men. Men are wearing makeup these days. Even though that is a small percentage, it still exists. It's showing the changing direction of, I suppose, how men interact with beauty in a way that is typically been seen as feminine, but it's starting to become more normalized. And fragrances are very much included in that as well. Men are increasingly buying more and more fragrances. The growth in men's fragrances is much higher than women's. And while women still buy fragrances at a higher percentage than men, that gap is closing considerably year on year, to the point where there are a lot of fragrance influencers on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram that are men, and they tailor their content towards men. Now, I have my opinions on the online community when it comes to men's fragrances, but I'm not going to go into that today. But the point I'm trying to drive is the term cologne exists to drive the divide between men and women in the fragrance market. In reality, gender doesn't exist in fragrances. It's all about the marketing. You could put YSL Black Opium into a Jean Paul Gaultier bottle, and because it's shaped like a man, put that bottle in front of a man, they will think, oh my God, this is such a lovely masculine scent. But it's really just how it's being marketed. Me personally, I am a big critic of the gendering of fragrance products. Now that that's out of the way, I'm going to talk about why concentration matters. What does it affect in a fragrance? Now, the main things that the concentration in a fragrance is going to affect is the projection and the longevity, but it can also affect the complexity of a fragrance as well. Now, typically fragrances with a lower concentration will project better than fragrances with a higher concentration. That may seem a little bit counterintuitive because there's more of it in the higher concentration, so you think people would be able to smell it more. What actually causes projection in a fragrance is the evaporation off your skin through the ethanol. The ethanol evaporating off your skin is carrying the fragrance molecules into the air. So the more ethanol that's on the skin, the more that it is evaporating and carrying those fragrances away. So that's why they're going to project better. However, on the flip side, because there is less of the scent molecules, they aren't going to last as long. As they evaporate off, they're disappearing quicker because they're evaporating quicker. That's why as you go up in concentration, typically the fragrance will last longer. But that isn't always the case. And realistically, the key factor in the longevity of a fragrance is going to be the materials that are used in its composition. What you can also get with higher concentrated fragrances is you can also get a more complex formulation. Because it's a higher concentration, you have more room in there for multiple, more complex formulations. A big example of this is in Baccarat Rouge between the Eau de Parfum and the Extrait de Parfum. Now, while I personally prefer the Eau de Parfum, a lot of people prefer the Extrait de Parfum because it does feel more rich and it feels deeper and more complex. I definitely can tell a difference between the two. While they do smell like the same fragrance, the Eau de Parfum is lighter, it's fresher, it's more floral, whereas the Extrait de Parfum is deeper, it's more ambery. That's at least to my nose anyway. So now I'm going to take you to the desk and we're going to have a look at what the concentrations look like in real practice. All right, we are at the desk, which is just my dining room table. This is where I do a lot of my perfumery preparation because I don't actually have a proper working space. I live in a small 1-bedroom apartment. Sue me. So today I'm going to be demonstrating to you what the difference in concentration actually looks like with this little 5ml bottle. I'm going to show it to you in there. I'm going to be making a little sample for my girlfriend of this little fragrance oil I've got here. So yeah, so there are typically 5 accepted concentrations of fragrance. Now I will show you the first one, even though no one should ever buy this concentration, because if you are, you're basically buying ethanol in a bottle. But that is eau fraîche. And what eau fraîche means in translation to English is fresh water. Typically an eau fraîche ranges from about 1 to 3% of your concentration. And what that looks like in practice, I don't even know if you can see it, is that in a bottle. That is about 1% of the bottle. And as you'll see when we compare to the other fragrances, this is nothing. So next we're going to be going on to eau de cologne, which typically ranges in about the 3 to 5% range. Now there's a place for eau de colognes in the industry. Certain fragrances do benefit from an eau de cologne. Napoleon Bonaparte is notorious for wearing this eau de cologne that he basically drank the way that he went through it. But the reason why he had to apply so much of it to himself is because it had absolutely no base notes in it if you actually look at the fragrance. So it would have lasted maybe half an hour on his skin. Now this might be me being a little bit generous, but what an eau de cologne looks like in practice, in the grand scheme of your bottle, is that. That might even be a little bit generous to an eau de cologne. It could be even less. As you can see, it isn't a lot. It does serve its purpose, but to me, I don't feel like it really does the job. Next, we have an eau de toilette, which typically ranges, they say from 5 to 15%. I normally say it's about a 10% concentration, but that can change. Really depends on the formulation of the fragrance, what percentage concentration is going to work the best. I would say about that would be your eau de toilette. I think I definitely was generous with the eau de cologne. That would be about your eau de toilette, that 10-ish, 10 to 15%. Now we get on to probably the most common type of fragrance, an eau de parfum. Eau de parfums are everywhere, and they will typically range from 15 to 25% concentration of fragrance compounds in the overall mix. Now, that is what an eau de parfum looks like. Now, if we think back to the eau de cologne and the eau fraîche, that is a significant difference. In terms of value for money, what you're probably going to pay for an eau de cologne compared to an eau de parfum, the eau de parfum is going to be much better value. Now, you'll notice on brands like Jo Malone pretty much makes all eau de colognes, but they are so expensive, but you're not getting anywhere near the concentration of fragrance compounds that you're getting in a typical eau de parfum. So you could be getting much better value for money by shopping different brands other than Jo Malone. I actually quite like the Jo Malone fragrances, but that was a shot at their concentration choices. And how you have a cologne intense, beyond me. Now we're going to go to the final concentration, which is parfum, which is just true perfume. Now you'll see a lot of brands use the term extrait de parfum. Same thing. Extrait de parfum and a parfum are the same thing. It's not like an extrait de parfum is above a regular parfum or anything like that. It is classed as the same concentration. So a parfum or an extrait de parfum is anything greater than 25%. I would say typically they're going to sit around 30%. Some brands may go higher than that, but 30% is about where the average is going to sit. That is what your parfum or extrait de parfum is going to look like. Now all we got to do is just make up the rest with some ethanol. And there you have a full bottle of perfume. So those are the types of concentrations of fragrances. You have eau fraîche, eau de cologne, eau de toilette, eau de parfum, and parfum or extrait de parfum. Now in fragrance marketing, you'll see terms thrown around like intense or elixir or other things like that. Now these are not true indications of concentration, these are just marketing tools. Now it may be that they've slightly reformulated the fragrance or they have added a little bit more to the concentration. Typically, it is just marketing. It is not a true indication of the concentration. If you're interested about the concentration of your fragrance, look at what it is specified as. If it's one of those 5 we've just discussed, that's the indication of its concentration. All right, back to the couch. Okay, cool. So now that we understand the concentrations and the different types of concentration that we have, now I suppose it's time to ask the question, why do these different concentrations exist? Why do brands sell their fragrances in different concentrations? Now, it changes when you go between niche fragrance and designer fragrance, why they're changing the formulation and why they're changing the concentration. Very often, they will change the concentration as a way to give different customers different options. Designer brands are typically making widely mass appealing fragrances, so they want to have an option for different customers. Some people will want to have something that's a little bit lighter, that's not going to be as powerful. Some customers aren't willing to spend the money on an eau de parfum or a parfum, so they might go for an eau de toilette. You will typically see in a lineup of fragrances, they will have an eau de toilette, an eau de parfum, and a parfum. And then they may have like an additional, slightly more concentrated version of that, like an elixir. Dior Sauvage is a perfect example of this, where their main lineup consists of an eau de toilette, an eau de parfum, a parfum, and then you have the elixir as well. So you can look at the difference in concentrations as a way to upsell people to buying the more expensive product. Because in the grand scheme of how much fragrance these brands are producing, it doesn't cost them that much extra to put that little bit of extra fragrance into the bottle. But when they can charge an extra $30 to $50 for that extra step up, it can potentially generate them a huge amount of bottom line revenue. So if you have an eau de toilette, but then you go to the eau de parfum and it's not that much extra, they will convince you that you're getting a better product out of it, but you may not necessarily be getting that. Typically, the differences between these formulations is not that great. You're not getting that much of an extra percentage, but they can just brand it as an eau de parfum or a parfum, and they will make you feel like you're getting a more premium product, where in fact, these versions may not even be the best versions in their lineup. There are many different fragrances where the eau de toilette typically has the best performance because it doesn't suffer too much on longevity, but you're getting better projection. Then we look at niche houses. Why do they have different formulations for different scents? You won't often see niche houses do flankers for the same scent all that often. There'll be a few of them there, but not too many. Sometimes it makes more sense for a brand to formulate with an eau de cologne to achieve the scent that they're trying to get. It could be a lighter, more airy scent that they want to actually have project more. It may fit the scent profile better to have it as an eau de cologne or an eau de toilette compared to an eau de parfum or a parfum. And often, rather than this being a business decision, it's an artistic decision by the perfumer to make it an eau de toilette, an eau de cologne, or an eau de parfum, or an extrait de parfum, or parfum. There are many reasons why they might change the formulation, they might change the concentration, and really the only way we can truly know is to actually ask the perfumer. But that's my breakdown on different fragrance concentrations. This is my first video on this channel. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a little bit today, and I'm going to be trying to make more videos in the future. So if you did like it, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.